The political Richter scale in London has just hit a perfect 10, and the foundations of Downing Street are turning into literal rubble. We are witnessing the unthinkable. Forget the usual back and forth of Prime Minister's questions. We have entered the realm of a constitutional apocalypse. In an unprecedented move that has left the political establishment reeling, Nigel Farage has just delivered a televised demolition of Keir Starmer that is tearing through Westminster like wildfire. We are talking about a direct assault on the government's honesty regarding the most sacred pillar of our society, the right to vote. Right now, Downing Street is in absolute chaos, advisors are in panic mode, and the British public is erupting in a fury that makes historical strikes look like a mild breeze. The reason? A staggering decision to suspend democracy for up to 10 million people across 63 council areas. This is not just a minor administrative tweak, it is a full-scale assault on the mandate of the people, and Nigel Farage has just pulled the pin on the grenade. Quick favour, if you're loving this, hit that subscribe button. Over 92% of viewers haven't yet. It's free. Takes a second and means the world to us. Thanks if you did. Now back to the show.
This Prime Minister is so desperate now, he's so on the run, that he resorted just to outright lies. Outright lies. The idea that I've suggested we should be punished with tariffs, I've never said anything of that kind whatsoever. What I'm saying is the opposite. What I'm saying to Americans is, please have a chat with the British government. Say this is not going to work the way it currently is, and for the betterment of both of us, let's rethink the legislation.
But you're not in Parliament as PMQs, you're Reform's leader. Why?
So what? What can I do there? I sit in Parliament, I get abused by everybody, I get to answer once every 2 or 3 months. I don't think that should be a priority over talking here to American legislators and American companies who matter a lot to our country.
This morning, Britain woke up to a nightmare scenario that constitutional experts are calling the gravest crisis of governance in years. The Labour government has just invited 63 councils to scrap their upcoming May elections, effectively giving local politicians a get-out-of-jail-free card to avoid the ballot box. The official excuse? A local government reorganisation so complex that apparently the simple act of putting a cross in a box would cause the entire system to collapse. It is a logic so warped it feels like a plot from a political thriller. Nigel Farage, sensing the stench of a stitch-up, took to the airwaves to dismantle this narrative with the clinical precision of a surgeon. He pointed out the blatant hypocrisy of a government that promised integrity, but is now presiding over a 1-year delay that has mysteriously turned into a permanent habit. If you have served your 4-year term and you are terrified of the voters, Labour's new policy seems to be, no problem, we will just postpone the reckoning. But hold on to your hats, because the technical jargon is just the first course in a very messy banquet of perceived corruption. As Nigel Farage dug deeper into the government's shifting stories, he uncovered a pattern of deception that suggests a party living in fear of the electorate. Last year, we were told by the then Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner, before her own dramatic exit from the front bench, that delays were a one-off necessity. Then in November, the House of Commons was assured that the May elections would proceed as planned. Yet, like a magician pulling a disappearing act on the voters, Minister Alison McGovern suddenly announced on December 18 that if a council voices genuine concerns, the government would be minded to grant a delay. One, it is the political equivalent of a student being told they can skip their exams if they just say they are not in the mood. Farage didn't just call it out, he detonated it, revealing that while Labour claims this is about capacity, the reality looks a lot more like a desperate attempt to avoid a walloping at the polls. The transition from technical necessity to democratic disaster happened in the blink of an eye. Nigel Farage pointed across the political divide, voice steady but dripping with sarcasm, as he exposed the utter lack of logic in the government's map. Why, he asked, did elections in Kent proceed without a hitch while their neighbours in Essex were told the sky would fall in if a vote took place? The answer, according to Reform UK, is as simple as it is devastating. The government is pausing democracy in precisely the areas where they are terrified of a reform surge. It is a move that has been described as dictatorial, turning the United Kingdom into what Farage calls a banana republic, where the ruling party chooses when and if the people get to speak. This is no longer a Westminster scandal. It has become a national moment of rupture where the public is starting to realise that their votes are being treated as optional extras by a government on the brink. Inside Westminster, the reaction to Farage's broadside has been a total bloodbath. Labour MPs are shifting in their seats as the footage of Starmer's silent clenched jaw reaction to Farage's interrogation goes viral. It was not controlled anger from the Prime Minister. It was a visible collapse of authority broadcast live to millions. When the Speaker had to invoke ancient rules to restore order, the Chamber realised that something has gone fundamentally wrong. The Labour Party's attempts at damage control have unravelled almost immediately. Senior figures are being dispatched to television studios with lines about releasing essential capacity, but the words sound hollow against the backdrop of 10 million people losing their voice. Voters do not see reform. They see a government that has lost its nerve and is now hiding behind the furniture. The political reaction has hit Downing Street like a tidal wave. Conservatives, sensing an opening, have sharpened their attacks, with James Cleverly initially expressing outrage before his own party-controlled councils in Sussex promptly announced they were cancelling their elections too. It is a circular firing squad of hypocrisy that Farage has gleefully highlighted. He noted with a grin that it took only 2 hours for Conservative principle to evaporate once they realised they could also avoid a thrashing from Reform candidates. This is a Labour-Conservative stitch-up of historic proportions, a moment where the two old parties have seemingly put aside their differences to protect their own seats from the rising tide of public anger. The tone has shifted from criticism to consequence, and the word ungovernable is starting to be whispered in the corridors of power. Amidst this chaos, the Labour Party's internal mood has turned toxic. Phones are buzzing non-stop as MPs receive furious messages from their constituencies. Long-standing supporters are expressing disbelief, and swing voters are moving from anger to resolution. Northern seats, once considered the red wall strongholds, suddenly feel exposed to a Reform UK movement that is moving with ruthless efficiency. Farage's message is simple and devastating. If a leader cannot even trust the people to vote, how can the people trust that leader to govern? The framing is spreading like wildfire, and the government's silence is becoming its own message of weakness. In modern politics, silence is an invitation to attack, and Farage is leading the charge with a megaphone.
Good afternoon. Well, the Labour Party conference is over. The second party conference of our governing Labour Party, a party that won the general election with a massive majority, but finds itself just 14 months in very deep and in many ways deserved trouble. It's been an extraordinary conference. I've been watching party conferences for half a century. Never before have I seen one name so dominate a conference, and the remarkable thing is it's somebody that isn't even a member of the Labour Party. Yes, it's me, Nigel Farage, and I thought the Mac cartoon on the front of today's Telegraph summed the whole thing up rather beautifully. The sketch was two delegates leaving the Labour Party conference, one saying to the other, next year we're going to the Reform conference because they don't talk about Nigel Farage all the time. It has been obsessive, whether it's the Home Secretary, whether it's the Health Secretary. It is a constant attack on me and what I stand for and what we as Reform UK, a party that has led the opinion polls now for over 100 polls. It's an attack on everything that we stand for and believe in. What I've learnt this week is that the government are incapable of beating us on our arguments. And as a result, the Prime Minister has decided to descend into the gutter and all of his cabinet with him. Let us be clear. Reform want illegal migrants deported from our country. And as I speak, a further 400 have crossed the English Channel today. Reform want the benefit system to be for UK citizens, for British citizens only, not for foreign-born nationals. Reform want foreign criminals removed from our country ASAP. Labour says these policies are racist and immoral, and by implication, Reform supporters, Reform voters, Reform sympathisers are racist too. Yes, if you think we should control our borders, you are, by the definition of the Prime Minister and his cabinet, all racists. Now, I don't normally worry about abuse being thrown at me. I've got kind of used to it over the course of the last few years. But to accuse countless millions of being racist is a very, very low blow. Why? Well, this language will incite and encourage the radical left. I'm thinking of Antifa and other organisations like that.
As night falls over Westminster, the damage continues to deepen. This was never just about one administrative delay. It was about a pressure system finally bursting. The eruption in the House of Commons, where the Prime Minister was seen losing his composure under the weight of Farage's forensic questioning, has become the defining image of the year. History rarely announces itself clearly, but the sight of a Prime Minister struggling to justify the suspension of elections is an unmistakable marker of an era in decline. Britain is no longer just watching a struggle for power, it is watching the authority of the office itself crack under the strain of its own contradictions. The public is not just debating what happened, they are judging a government that seems to have forgotten who it actually serves. By the next morning, the aftershocks were impossible to contain. Every headline and every analysis returns to the same reality: a Prime Minister unable to command the room and a government exposed as fragile. Attempts to frame the delays as standing up for reform have collapsed, as replay after replay shows the same loss of control. The Electoral Commission has even weighed in, expressing disappointment at the timing and substance of the move, essentially telling the government that capacity constraints are a pathetic excuse for delaying democracy. When the independent watchdogs start growling, you know the government is in serious trouble. Confidence in leadership is no longer a topic for debate, it is an open question behind every closed door in Whitehall. The atmosphere inside Labour headquarters has turned poisonous as polling data is projected onto screens like a terminal diagnosis. Marginal seats are flashing red, and the fear is no longer hypothetical. MPs are calculating their own survival, and quiet conversations about a leadership change are growing louder and less discreet. The name Starmer is no longer spoken with the authority of a landslide winner. It is spoken with the concern of a party that sees its future slipping away. Meanwhile, Reform UK is editing clips of the parliamentary meltdown into brutal contrasts. Farage's calm versus Starmer's chaos. It is a simple message that resonates because it aligns with what people can see with their own eyes. The constitutional experts have stepped into the spotlight, raising questions that cut far deeper than party politics. They are asking if a line has been crossed that cannot be uncrossed. Does authority return once it has been publicly stripped away by the Speaker? Can a government that suspends elections ever truly claim to have the consent of the governed? These are not abstract academic debates, they strike at the heart of the social contract. The British public is listening closely, sensing that something fundamental has shifted in the way they are being ruled. The pressure is tightening, and calls for formal investigations and ethics committees are multiplying by the hour.
And his total level of denial over broken Britain is quite extraordinary. We all know the roads are clogged in a way they never were before. We all know you can't get a GP appointment. We all know that crime is out of control. So much so that here in London, men don't wear watches, women don't wear jewellery, and don't get your mobile phone out, otherwise somebody on a moped will take it. Britain is broken and it needs fixing. And our vision for the future is the positive one. We believe that we can do it. This Labour conference lacks any vision, and we are going to continue, I'm sorry to say, in economic, social and cultural decline. But Starmer is right about one thing. We are facing a big fork in the road. He is a human rights lawyer who will bow down to foreign courts and to outdated treaties. And he has no idea of the division that open borders have caused within our communities, or indeed the anger and a sense of unfairness that people feel over two-tier policing and two-tier justice under two-tier care. What he and the rest don't understand, and the reason we're leading in the polls, is this country has had enough of a failing, gutless political class. It wants real change. Now look, I'm not a vindictive person in any way at all. But reform will teach Keir Starmer and the Labour Party a lesson next May. Next May are our equivalent of the midterms, when the whole of Wales, Scotland, London and many other parts of the country will go out to vote on the first Thursday in May. We will teach Starmer a lesson next May that British political history will never forget. I am now, as a result of this week and the abuse that has been heaped upon our supporters and our voters, more determined than ever. Don't underestimate that.
Outside the Westminster bubble, the mood has settled into a steady, determined pressure. The crowds are not just angry passers-by anymore. They are organised, vocal, and they aren't going anywhere. Banners calling for an immediate general election dominate the streets of the capital from morning until night. This is not an outrage that will burn out quickly. It feels like a movement that has found its moment of maximum leverage. Media coverage has turned relentless, with satire shows ridiculing the election-dodging government and embedding the failure into popular culture. The phrase "forced out" has become the shorthand for a political class that has run out of ideas and out of time. As the weeks turn into months, the consequences of this May election massacre continue to spread. International partners are growing cautious, and scheduled meetings are being downgraded as foreign capitals begin to wonder about Britain's stability. A country once seen as a bastion of democratic norms now appears uncertain and visibly weakened. Even the civil service is reportedly bracing for a sudden transition, preparing briefing papers for a leadership handover that many now see as inevitable. The machinery of the state is adapting to the reality that continuity can no longer be taken for granted. Bold policy reforms have been replaced by desperate risk management as the government tries to survive from one news cycle to the next. For the average person on the street, the meltdown in Parliament has become symbolic of a political class unable to cope with the real world. Rising costs, public services under strain, and immigration concerns are the issues that demand firm leadership. Yet the public sees only a government focused on its own survival. The anger has matured into a hardened cynicism that is far more dangerous for those in power than any temporary protest. Labour's internal divisions are spilling into the open, with anonymous briefings from senior ministers distancing themselves from the Prime Minister's temperament and judgment. The language is no longer about policy, it is personal and it is brutal. Nigel Farage's rise in the polls has been nothing short of astonishing. Once dismissed by the elite, he now appears at the very centre of the national conversation, frequently topping the best Prime Minister rankings in former Labour heartlands. His message resonates with voters who feel they have been ignored, dismissed and now literally silenced. The political map of Britain is being redrawn in real time, seat by seat, as the old guarantees of the two-party system evaporate. Stability, once taken for granted, now feels like a fragile memory, and the country is entering a volatile period where sudden shifts are the only thing you can count on. The government's attempts to project calm only highlight how thin the ice has become. Scripted lines about listening to local areas fall flat because the public senses the fear behind the polish. They see a leader who is reacting to events rather than shaping them, absorbing pressure rather than directing it. In politics, that perception of weakness is often fatal. Across the country, the conversation has changed. People aren't talking about the details of the local government reorganisation anymore. They are talking about competence and credibility. They are asking, if he lost his head in a television studio and a parliamentary chamber, what happens when a real crisis hits? This was never just about one outburst or one delayed vote. It was about a system that has been pushed to the breaking point. The eruption inside Parliament didn't just expose the Prime Minister, it exposed a country at a historic crossroads. Britain is now waiting to see if Keir Starmer will step aside or be forced out by a party that is terrified of the coming electoral storm. The question is no longer if the political order is changing, but how fast the collapse will happen. If this crisis has proven anything, it is that in modern politics, everything can change in a matter of minutes, and once the public loses trust, there is often no way back. History has shown that once momentum builds, it rarely waits for a convenient time to strike. The election delays may have been intended to buy the government time, but they have instead cost them their last remaining shred of authority. Nigel Farage didn't just rip into Labour, he exposed the hollow core of a government that thought it could manage the public's voice like a spreadsheet. Britain now stands in the shadow of that live televised dismantling, waiting for the final resolution, whether it comes through a resignation, a leadership challenge or a surge from Reform UK. One thing is certain, the political landscape of 2026 has been altered forever. Something has shifted beneath the surface and the country is moving forward into unknown territory, fully aware that the old rules no longer apply. Thank you for watching.